Hello everyone, and welcome to the first episode of a whole new thing that's kind of an old thing, an old idea that I've flirted with for a long time now, but you can call this the official launch. This is me finally getting serious about it. It's a podcast I'm calling Conversations with Joe, and the idea is simple. It's me, Joe, having conversations with interesting people. That's it. That's the whole idea. It's really just, honestly, it's just an excuse for me to talk to people that I think are inspiring or interesting or experts in the fields of topics that I cover on my channel. And maybe, just maybe, you guys will find it interesting as well. But being that this is the first episode, I'm still kind of figuring it all out. You know, you might find this one to be a little bit rough and a little unpolished, and that's okay. You have to be willing to be a little crap at first when you try something new, or else you'll never get around to it, which might be why it took me so long to do this in the first place. But I decided to just jump in and I just ask for your patience as we move forward and smooth things out. And obviously I'm open to advice and ideas that you might have along the way. So also being that this is the first episode, I don't really have any theme music for this. We'll probably just throw some stock music in there starting out. But I know I've got a lot of talented followers out there, so I'm going to open this up to you guys. Anybody that's musically inclined, I invite you to throw something my way. So 30 seconds to a minute. Obviously, it's got to be copyright cleared and whatnot. But I'll switch them out on the podcast from here going forward. And if one of them sticks, who knows? It might become the official song of the podcast. So yeah, you can hit me up on my website, answerswithjoe.com. Any of my socials at Answers with Joe. And yeah, I'm interested to see what shakes out. Have fun with it. But anyway, that's enough of that. Let's get to the main event. So for the first episode of this series, I wanted to start with something kind of easy, someone I knew I could have a good conversation with, and somebody I was dying to talk to because I had a million questions about his recent book. The book, of course, is Project Hail Mary, and the person, of course, is Andy Weir. Andy's been a friend of the channel for a few years now. He and I talked a couple years back, so this is a good chance to catch up. I will say we get super spoilery once we start talking about Hail Mary, so if you've been meaning to read the book and you wanted to go in blind, you might want to peace out when we get to that point, because it's really probably better if you do go in blind. But if you have read it, he gives a fascinating look at the process that was behind the writing of the book and the insane attention to detail he paid to the science in the book, which, of course, we would expect nothing less from Andy Weir. But anyway, I think that gets you up to speed, so I'll stop talking now. Please enjoy this chat with Andy Weir. With me today is a friend of the channel, somebody that needs no introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. He's the author of The Martian, Artemis, and Project Hail Mary that just came out this year. Friend of the channel, Mr. Andy Weir.
Hey-o.
I told you that'd be a lame intro.
Yeah, you did.
You're like, and you succeeded. Yeah.
And you did. I mean, it wasn't that lame. It was good.
So I wanted to start by talking about, 2 years ago, it's been 2 years. Can you believe that, since the last time we talked? Or since I came out to your house?
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, you were kind. You opened your house to me, and you even played along with my little sketch and everything. But yeah, I realized the other day that's been almost 2 years and I almost threw up.
Well, yeah, it's like time and coronavirus are sort of a...
Exactly. But here's the irony. So when I did that was supposed to be the first of like a series of conversational videos where I go out and meet with people and have one-on-one blah, blah, blah and everything. And then, I just kind of fell behind a little bit, and then coronavirus hit. And so face-to-face did not exist anymore. And so here we are 2 years later, and I am kind of starting up a new podcast thing. I've been talked into it by some people that I work with, and the first person I wanted to talk to is you. So let's try this again, shall we?
Okay.
Maybe I'll stick with it this time.
Questions with Joe.
I'm thinking Conversations with Joe.
I mean, okay, it lacks a certain symmetry, but okay.
Yeah. But I like it being more conversational than just me throwing questions at people.
Yeah, I mean, you should have a pranking channel where you just go pull people's pants down, and it's like Pantsers with Joe.
Pants with Joe.
Just dancers with Joe.
Dancers with Joe.
There's a lot of places you could go with that.
Here's what we do.
You could get the Pips.
Okay. Or there's Dancing with the Stars.
Right.
It could be Dancing with the Stars, but with a bunch of celebrities named Joe. Dancers with Joe.
Dancers with Joe. So there's you, Joe Scott, and then there'd be Joe Rogan.
Oh my God.
Maybe you and Joe Rogan dancing.
I guess there's Joe Biden.
Joe Biden? Yeah, there's another fairly famous Joe.
Fairly famous.
Fairly famous.
Actually, I really don't run into a lot of Joes in my real life. It seems like
I
such
mean,
a common name.
historically, there's a lot of Joe. I mean, there's like Joseph Stalin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't that an episode of Friends where Joey wanted to change his name, so he picked Joseph Stalin? He's like, apparently there was already a Joseph Stalin.
Apparently, and he was really bad.
He like killed a bunch of people. But then there's the movie Better Off Dead, where the main antagonist, his name is Roy Stalin.
Oh, was he really?
Yeah. The John Cusack movie.
Yeah,
that's an old favorite.
The bad guy. Oh yeah, I love that movie. The bad guy skier. Whatever.
Yeah. Roy Stalin was his name.
Stalin. I never even caught that.
Yeah. And then there's the $2 kid.
$2.
I actually have a shirt that says
I want my $2 or
no. So okay, well here's the story. So it says Lane Meyer ski champion.
Oh.
Skied the K-12 on one ski or something like that. And I was just walking around at VidCon a few years ago, and this guy who worked at the hotel that I was walking through, he had his like hotel uniform, like the lobby boy uniform or whatever. And I walked past him and he was like, "Hey." And I thought, because I was at VidCon, maybe he recognized me as a YouTuber or something.
Another fan.
Yeah, and I was like, yes, I'll take a minute and talk to you. But he like starts unbuttoning his jacket, and I'm like, okay, what's happening here? and he had a shirt that said, "I want my $2 on it."
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I was like, no way. So we got a picture and everything. So love those little in jokes when somebody else gets it. It's like, we're gonna be okay, you and me.
Fansters with Joe.
That's another one.
There we go. There will be 73 more during the course of this interview, just so
fair enough.
Okay.
Big truck out in my backyard.
FedEx?
No. It's just a blank truck. It's probably gonna steal my stuff.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Okay, so let's just jump into Project Hail Mary, shall we?
All right.
So how spoilery are you okay with being?
It's up to you. It's your show, so we can be as spoilery as you want, as long as you give a warning.
Okay, well, spoiler warning.
You're gonna go. So step 1, spoiler warning. Step 2, let's talk about Rocky. Is that
exactly? Yes, because okay, so you've been through this before. I feel like.
Yeah. That's everybody's favorite character. I had no idea. So hopefully, anybody who's still listening here understands that we have given you plenty of spoiler warning.
Yeah.
And you have no right to be pissed off at this point. But Rocky is an alien, and he's a kind of a 5-legged spider-like creature. He stands about 1 meter tall. So Project Hail Mary is a first contact book. And I wanted to make Rocky likable. I wanted him to be, he's a character. He's the deuteragonist, you could say. And no, yeah, it's for real. I mean, he's the second most important character.
It's a buddy film, really. It's a buddy cop movie in space.
It really is. It's a bromantic comedy. And so I'm like, okay, yeah, I think I made him likable, and all's that well. And then just the fan reaction to Rocky has been overwhelming. Like, people are like, "Hey, I liked your book. Grace is cool. Also, I would die for Rocky." People absolutely love him.
Well,
it
is a spoiler. It is a spoiler because I did not see that coming.
Good.
Like you do and you tell me if this is a fair term, but hard sci-fi.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like very rooted in reality, very like based on the numbers and the science and everything. And I'm reading this book, and all of a sudden there's an alien. I was like, oh my God, he has an alien in this thing? And I was like, wow. And I was like really excited. And then it turns out like, okay, let me flip out on you for just a second. In a good way.
Oh, okay.
I have gone over and over in my channel about how like one of my biggest beefs in sci-fi is when they land on a planet and it's basically like, it has oxygen, we can live here.
Yeah, it's comfortable, gravity's good. Yeah.
And nobody talks about air pressure. Air pressure is so important, and like that's something that you actually used in this book. And I was like, thank you, because like it never gets addressed at like the problems around it and how just different life would be under different air pressures and stuff. And you did that, and that made me so happy.
Oh, thanks, because that's actually one of my pet peeves as well. It's always bothered me. I'm like, wow, what do you know? Another group of aliens that happen to be about 2 meters tall, that are kind of
Humanoid.
bipedal,
Yeah.
humanoid, or at least humanoid enough that a guy in a suit could play them. And okay, so I get that there's production limitations. So I don't mind any of that stuff at all. I don't mind that, like, my favorite sci-fi show is Doctor Who.
Hmm.
And, and I also really love Star Trek and Star Wars. And all of those feature just like every planet everywhere that has life everywhere has a completely compatible atmosphere. Everyone can just hang out together in the same
Yeah.
environment. Everybody's totally comfortable. Okay. Well, that's always bugged me.
Hmm.
I enjoy those shows. I'm like, okay, this is, it's soft sci-fi. It's like, whatever. It's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, you know what? You also can't go faster than the speed of light, but all of those shows do that too. So,
Yeah.
whatever. But yeah, I wanted to do this in my own kind of hard sci-fi way. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have an alien, but I'm not gonna just make everything convenient. Okay,
Hmm.
so the odds that an alien would be comfortable in our environment are just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking like, well, so I built Rocky's species from the ground up. I started by saying like, I'm going to pick a planet, a real
Okay. I was
exoplanet.
going to ask you about this. Yeah. Yeah. Go
Yeah.
for that.
So Rocky is from the star system 40 Eridani, which is a real star system. And he is from the planet 40 Eridani AB, which is really, that's because of the way they name things. But basically, it is the closest planet to the star 40 Eridani.
And that is an actual exoplanet that we
It
found.
is a real exoplanet.
Cool.
It,
Okay.
it really exists, and we know some things about it. We know its orbital characteristics. We know that we know how far it is from the star. We know, of course, all sorts of stuff about the star itself. We know how long we know its period, and we also know its mass. It's about 8 times Earth's mass. It's a super Earth, so to
Hmm.
speak.
Hmm.
And a planet that close to a star can't be a gas giant, because if it was a gas giant, the star would just absorb it.
Yeah.
And so it has to be kind of a rocky world, no pun intended. And so I said, like, okay, so that's what's known. And so from that, I said, like, I want a biosphere on this planet. So what can I mess with that is not provably wrong, right?
Hmm.
So I'm like, well, I get to decide what the atmosphere is like. I also get to decide what the rotation rate of the planet is like. I get to decide its density. I get to decide all these things that science doesn't know. So I said,
Hmm.
make it easy. Density is the same as Earth. It's got like a, liquid metal mantle core thing, stuff going on like that. Second off, I decided I wanted it to have like a really thick atmosphere because I wanted a biosphere that's almost like an ocean. So at the upper levels, you have like things that live off of light. And then below that, you have things that eat those things. Below that, all the way down to the surface level, you have the apex predators. But for fun, I wanted to say, like, there's no light on the surface. This is a species that never evolved vision.
Yeah. Okay.
But also, it had to be a thick atmosphere because any planet that close to its star is going to be really hot. And I
Right.
also wanted there to be liquid water. And the only way to have really, really hot liquid water is to have it under really high pressure.
Mm. Well, if it's a super Earth, would the size of it and the mass and the gravitational characteristics kind of lend itself to a thicker atmosphere like that, or?
Well, it's weird because for whatever reason, that doesn't seem to matter very much.
Oh, okay.
So you take for instance something like, Earth, we have 1 atmosphere of pressure. Okay, Venus, which is almost the exact same mass as Earth,
Right.
has 90 times our atmospheric pressure. So
Yeah.
whatever causes the formation of atmospheres, and I'm sure planetary scientists know a lot about this, but I don't. Yeah, but one thing I do know is, anyway, I wanted there to be liquid water, and I figured it was going to be really hot. So that means it has to have a really thick atmosphere, which led me to the next issue. I'm like, you don't get really thick atmospheres right next to a star, because the star just basically sandblasts the planet, just blows the atmosphere off. The only reason we still have, I mean, you look at Mars, that's what happened to Mars. The only reason we still have our atmosphere is because we have a magnetic field to like deflect most of the thing around. And I'm like, okay, well, what if Erid, which is ERID, which is what I named the planet. I said, what if that has a badass magnetic field, like way, way stronger than Earth's magnetic field. So it can actually deflect the shock of being that close to the star and maintain its atmosphere. Okay, great. How does a planet get a big magnetic field? Turns out you get a big magnetic field by spinning really fast. So now I know that Arid has a really fast rotation rate. And so now I'm like, okay, so their day is like 6 hours long. And so I'm learning, I'm like, okay, this is the environment. And I decided it was going to be like sort of a failed gas giant. It's ammonia. The atmosphere is ammonia. And I'm like, okay, so we have a very high atmosphere, ammonia, yada, 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 did all that. And I'm like, okay, now I need to make a life form that lives in that.
Okay, wait. Let me back up a little bit. So at this point in the construction of the story, you've already decided there's going to be an alien.
Yeah.
That he comes into contact with.
Yeah.
And from there you start kind of, like you said, sort of constructing it by creating its atmosphere and then creating the species itself.
Right.
I guess where I want to find out, like, how much of a pause was there in the development of the story to just kind of like figure this out, or was it just like an ongoing process?
Oh, no. I said, like, I'm going to have me an alien. And so I'm going to spend the next few weeks, I'm not even thinking about the story. Plot can just go sit over there. I'm not even, I had worked out most of the details of the alien before I wrote the first word of the story. I was like, okay. I want, this first contact story, I'm going to do an alien my way. And like my way is to be as scientifically accurate as possible.
Okay, so almost like you're a chef, like you're preparing all the ingredients first. You're chopping the broccoli, you're making the sauce or whatever, and like that. So you took a little bit of time to put all that stuff together, and then you.
So the basic plot of the story is very direct. It's not actually that complicated. There are some twists and turns and stuff, but the plot is existential threat to Earth. Solution might be here. Send someone there, meets an alien. They work together. Buddies ensue. Problem solved. Everyone wins. I mean, that's the whole plot. So having known that that's what was going to happen at the beginning, just like I had the final scene in mind from before I started writing even, so now I'm like, okay, I got to get the details right. I got to put a lot of time and effort into designing Rocky's species, and also a lot of time and effort into designing the Hail Mary itself, and, fun stuff like that. But it was really important. Like, I went way down the rabbit hole. There's a lot of stuff that never made it into the book. With Rocky, like how his biology works. I have a big long document on my desktop. In my Project Hail Mary folder of just Iridian biology and how everything works. Like just all the details of how things work.
Could you release that as like a supplemental book, almost like an encyclopedia or something?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know how many people would be that interested in it. It might be better as just like a web page that I put up and people say, hey, here you go, knock yourself out. And I
mean, it's interesting enough that I think people would be like, okay, I want to dive further into this,
Yeah. Thanks. But yeah, I mean, it's not like book worthy. Yeah. I mean, it would an entire fictional biology book. There's no story. There's no plot.
There's plenty of precedents for that. Didn't Tolkien invent entire languages for Lord of the Rings and stuff? I mean,
sure. Well, when you get to Lord of the Rings levels of popularity, if I basically invent a new genre of storytelling like Tolkien did, then yeah, people might be interested in entire books about the minutia of it. But
you don't know where these things could go. It could happen.
I don't know. Yep.
So real quick, one of the standout scenes, I don't know why this stood out so much to me, but and it's actually been a while. So I actually read the book on Kindle before the printed version came out. And that was actually one of the reasons why I hesitated to try to get you on here to talk about it, was because like I did want to ask you specific questions, and the book had like just come out, and I was like, I wouldn't feel comfortable being that spoilery right off the bat like that. But no, it's the scene where Rocky eats in front of him.
Yeah. And doesn't want to.
I just thought, like, was that sort of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, it kind of humanized him as a character that like, we don't think about how, well, for the people listening, if you not know what we're talking about, he has only one hole. he doesn't have a flow through.
He actually doesn't even really have that. What happens is he splits open. Like, his body is like completely hermetically sealed most of the time. And there's this like thing that splits open, and he like ejects the waste.
Yeah.
And then eats. and then it closes and then heals closed, like skin, like
Yeah.
healed. Obviously,
So
this is pleasant for them. It's not like painful or anything like that. That's also how they lay eggs when the time comes.
okay. Well, but so the and I'm forgetting the main character's name. I'm sorry.
Grace.
Grace. Yeah, yeah. So uh he wanted to see how Rocky ate because obviously he's curious and this is a different species and everything. And Rocky's just like, why would you want to see this? And then you realize it's because basically he's asking to see him poop.
Yep.
You know, and it's like it's analogous to him for like going to the bathroom. So Rocky's just like, why are you wanting to watch this, pervert? You know.
Yeah. Well, I also just wanted to be like, it's always been kind of odd to me that as humans, just in every human culture you want to go to, people consider, biological functions to be either gross or private, right?
Taboo
It's like,
in some way, yeah.
yeah, well, not necessarily taboo because we all got to do it, but it's like, okay, if you got to pee, you do that by yourself. If you got to poop, you do that by yourself. Okay, if you're going to have sex, you and your partner do it. Let's just, not in the public square, please. And stuff like that. So there's these basic biological functions, even so much as just if you're going to spit, try to be, don't be crude, spit somewhere. No, yeah. And even things like burps and farts and stuff like that are considered at the very least funny, and stuff like that. But for whatever reason, eating, we're all cool with that. Just go ahead. Yeah, you can eat right in front of me. That's fine. But that's like, it's weird because it's a biological function. And literally every single other biological function we have is something that's considered like either private or gross, but not eating. You can just watch.
In fact, it's a very social thing.
It's a very social thing. Hey, let's all get together and eat. So like to Rocky, that's the equivalent of like, hey, let's all get together and, take a dump. Hey, it works for the Romans, right? That's what they do.
I don't like taking a dump alone.
Yeah, who would want to take a dump alone? Come on. Are you busy? I got to take a dump. I don't know. I don't really have to yet.
He's taking a dump by himself.
Oh man, that guy over there. He's
so lonely.
He's at a toilet for one.
But I love that though. I mean, that it's just that sort of one species looking at another and not understanding, and I thought that was just a great little moment.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to get too deep into Rocky's like social or societal norms and stuff like that, because I mean, I didn't want to have to define an entire planet's history and all this stuff like that, and it would be a big distraction. So I just kind of hinted at it. I just wanted to give the reader a feeling that like there's a lot more like cultural stuff going on back here than you're seeing. You're just seeing the very tippy top of it. And so I wanted them to feel like, oh, it's all back there. You just don't know what it is. But I don't know what it is either. But
yeah. Well, I'm sure in the world building, there has to be a point where you're like, okay, I have to stop here.
Yeah.
Because I could just keep doing this forever,
Yeah, I mean, that'd be fun. But I didn't really bother to put together too much about Rocky's society. But I did do the sleeping thing where because I decided, I started off with no assumptions. I didn't necessarily want to make a parallel for everything that humans do, but I figured like the way I designed the Iridian body, the way their muscles work is actually kind of steam powered in a weird way.
Oh, right. Yeah. It's like hydraulics.
Well, in a way, basically they have two circulatory systems, two completely unconnected circulatory systems. One of them is hotter than the boiling point of water, and the other one is actually kind of room temperature. It's below the boiling point of water. So when they want to extend a muscle, or when they want to clench a muscle, or actually, yeah, when they want to extend a muscle, it has a bunch of little sacs of liquid water in it, and they open up the blood vessels to it that cause it to boil and expand into steam, and so the muscle expands. And then when they want to close, they expose it to they open up the blood vessels for the cold, for the ambient temperature circulatory system, and it condenses back into water and pulls it back together. And so that's how their muscles work. And so I'm like, okay, so that's how their muscles work. That's cool. Their blood, it obviously can't be water, because if one of the circulatory systems is above the boiling point of water, it can't be water. So their blood is actually largely mercury. And so it's a metal, and it can conduct heat very well and stuff like that. So you've got your hot circulatory system, and most of their body is inorganic. Most of their body is kind of like we have hair, fingernails, teeth, stuff like that, that's inorganic. Their body is like the vast majority of it that, and they have little worker cells that swim around in the bloodstream and go service the body. Well, all of those cells would die if they're inside the hot circulatory system, because the water inside of them would boil and they'd die. So I'm like, okay, well then how does the body service, things in the hot circulatory system? What if there's like, a problem over here, it needs to repair, or a tear or a rip or whatever, all the basic body maintenance. And I'm like, okay, they must go through a period where they cool down the hot circulatory system so the worker cells can get in. And I'm like, but when they do that, they'll be paralyzed because they can't make their muscles turn on and off anymore. And I'm like, okay, this sounds a lot like sleep. Right? This sounds a lot like, okay, you're gonna sit motionless for a while your body does stuff, don't worry about it. But they're actually like super dead ass asleep, paralyzed. Like until their hot circulatory system like gets hot again, they literally cannot move. It's not like our mental block against moving when sleeping. It's like, so then I thought, like, how does a society evolve? Because you have to have a society if you're going to be space worthy. How does a society evolve with a limitation like that? And I'm like, well, that answers itself. The only way for that species to evolve and survive is for them to guard each other while they're sleeping. Right. So it's like, oh, if you're going to sleep, I'm going to make sure no predators get you. And then when I sleep, you make sure no predators get me. And we'll have like a whole village of people and we'll sleep in shifts. Right. And so all of that thought went into just a few little lines where Rocky's like, oh, you're going to sleep? I'll watch. He's like, well, I don't. Or actually, no, it was Rocky was like, I'm going to sleep. I want you to watch. And
Grace thought that was really weird. And
no, I don't want to do that. I got stuff to do. And he's like, no, I want you to watch me. Because they feel uncomfortable if you're sleeping with no one watching you. That's uncomfortable to them.
Yeah, but it was a similar idea of like increasing pressure and releasing pressure in cavities to make things move.
Yeah,
right, exactly.
Creepy ass things.
I know. Yeah, weird tentacles. Exactly. They got a use, I guess. I'm also curious about the astrophage.
Okay, that was a lot of fun too.
How much of that was like I just need to solve this problem, and how much of it was I guess integral to the story or whatever. Like how much time do you have to set aside to figure that one out?
Short answer, a lot. But basically, this all started with like I had a story called Jacques that I'd been working on after The Martian and before Artemis, and it fell apart. It was just not working. But it had in it the idea of this of a fuel that could just be turned into light energy, and so it was the most efficient. So it was the most efficient possible form of spacecraft fuel. And I got to thinking like, man, wouldn't it be awesome if we had that like here today, not some distant future, but like now. And I'm like, well, okay, maybe there's a story there. How do we end up with something like that? And I'm like, well, we don't have anything like the science necessary to make that happen. And I can't plausibly come up with any, and this Dr. Brock Danger the third comes up with this and he's just awesome and no one else ever thought of this and now he's made it. No. And I'm like, okay, so it's not that. Well, what if it's alien? What if it's alien technology that we get a hold of? That would explain it. And then I'm like, well, do I want aliens in my story? I'm like, yeah, maybe if it's just lost alien technology. But then I'm like, okay, well then how do they make more? And I'm like, well, maybe maybe you can use it to make more of it, maybe it's kind of like a crystal that you start seeding and it can nucleate and stuff like that. Then I'm like, well, wait a minute, a thing that makes more of itself, that sounds like life. And I'm like, okay, what if it's just life? I'm like, okay, so what would make life need to, store that much energy? I mean, I want to use this for interstellar fuel. So what in the world would make life want that kind of energy storage? And I'm like, oh, because it's doing interstellar travel. That's what it's doing. It's storing the energy so it can go seed out to other stars. It's not intelligent. It's just mold. And it's a very simple form of life. It just absorbs energy, uses it to spawn.
Yeah. In a way, it made me think of the whole slime mold thing, that like it can construct highway systems that are exactly the same as we
Yeah.
do, without a brain at all.
Yeah.
I was just wondering how much of that was like, I don't know. I'm reading the book and I get into things like that, and I'm just like, how did he come up with that? That's just so bizarre. Like,
Lots of fun. I love doing that stuff. Like I went, just like Iridians, I went way deep into Astrophage. Like I went all the way down to, I finally got to, okay, here is the hand wavy part that exists to make this work. And I managed to drive that hand wavy part all the way down to the quantum level. Like yeah. Basically the hand wavy part is that Astrophage somehow has the ability to contain neutrinos. And it also has the ability to turn kinetic energy of protons into neutrino pairs. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I don't explain how it does that. I just say, or scientists are like, we don't know how the fuck it does that. Mm-hmm. Oh, how do you feel about swearing? Sorry.
Yeah, whatever.
All right. Yeah. Or scientists are like, we don't know how it does that. And so that's my little magic hand wavy part. But beyond that, everything works. It just yeah. So
you gotta start with the magic.
Yeah.
And then sci-fi space magic, and then like just figure out how
outward from there. Yeah. And so I'm like, well, wait a minute, this is cool. So once I decided they'd use neutrinos to store energy and stuff like that. Neutrinos are, I always pronounce it wrong. I say Majorina particles, but it might be like Maharina particles or whatever. But in other words, they are a part, this is in the real world, they are a particle who is their own antiparticle. So if you can get two neutrons to collide, they will annihilate and turn into photons. Did I say neutrons? I meant neutrinos. Neutrinos. I don't want an angry bunch of, no, angry science lunch mom. No, neutrinos. And actually, even that is just speculated. Yeah. It's probably true, but not proven. And neutrinos are notoriously difficult to interact with at all. You have 100 trillion neutrinos passing through you every second, Joe. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've only got like something. I've only got like 6 neutrinos passing through me a second. You should see a doctor, but no, it's the neutrinos will just sail right through Earth without colliding with a single thing, because their quantum properties are basically, their odds of colliding are so small. Astrophage has this super cross sectionality, which means the neutrinos can't get out of the cell wall. Okay, and then I was like, okay, that's interesting. And it makes neutrinos, I decided, by having like ionized hydrogen gas, in other words, protons, bang into each other. And that kinetic energy is turned into 2 neutrinos going opposite directions. So that makes the energy and the momentum balance. So everything physics-wise is fine. This is not a thing that probably happens, but you can't prove it doesn't. And there is such a thing as pair production, where like, which is really weird. Brief aside, you've got, let's say, a big thick ass nucleus, like a uranium atom minding its own business. And then a gamma ray goes by. Just this gamma ray goes by, and the interaction between the gamma ray and the nucleus of the atom can cause pair production, where the gamma ray's energy becomes an electron and a positron going opposite directions. And then that can't happen by itself. A photon can't just turn into a gamma ray can't just turn into a positron and electron, because there's no way to balance the momentum and energy of that equation. There's no way to make the total momentum and kinetic energy the same. But if you have a comparatively heavy nucleus, then it ends up picking up a little bit of velocity in a certain direction, and that makes everything possible. And so it happens, and that's real. So I've kind of taken that to the next step, and I've said, like, okay, anything that is balanced in both momentum and energy is something that could happen. And so I decided 2 protons whack into each other with a certain minimum amount of energy. They could, I've decided, be able to make 2 neutrons going opposite directions. All that works. And so that's cool. And then I got to thinking, well, wait a minute. Now I know, like, if they hit each other without enough energy, with less than the mass energy of 2 neutrinos, then they just bounce, right? I mean, they can't turn that energy in. And if they do it with more, then they'll make the two neutrinos and they'll still have some kinetic energy left over. So they'll bash into each other, make neutrinos, and then continue moving a little bit slower. And so I'm like, so what is that exact velocity? Okay, so easy to calculate that exact velocity. And I'm like, well, if you have a gas, if you have a bunch of particles moving a known velocity, then that means you know the temperature of that object, because that's what temperature is. It's the velocity of the molecules moving around, or the mean velocity. And so I did that, and it turns out astrophage are always 94.573 degrees Celsius. And I'm like, well, that's cool. I mean, it's like I just did a bunch of bullshit and came out with a number. And I just love it when that happens, because now I'm like, that's the critical temperature of astrophage. If it's receiving more heat, if it's in an environment hotter than that, it's building neutrinos. If it's in an environment colder than that, it's not.
And it just happens to be close to our own body temperature.
No, not at all. 97 Celsius.
Celsius. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay.
It happens to be close to the boiling point of water.
My American just showed through.
Yeah. Sorry. Well, you're an American.
So,
would you like me to convert it to furlongs per fortnight for, more convenient numbers?
Let's just stick with Kelvin. I think we'll
be on
the same page.
Right.
Narratively, it's like it's told through a series of flashbacks from a guy who's like lost his memory and he's like slowly retrieving it and stuff. And as a reader, it was kind of like being on a bit of a roller coaster in terms of the astrophage, because it's like it starts with like the discovery of this thing that's destroying the sun. It's like a bacteria that's eating the sun or something, and you're like, wow, that's interesting. And then we learn how to capture the astrophage, and then we figure out how to power spaceships with it, and oh, that's what's powering the spaceship that I'm on. And it was kind of like, as you're reading it, it's like it just kind of builds and builds and builds. But then I'm looking back, it's like, was that a magic trick? Because like, did you start with like, this is the thing that powers the ship, and now let's go back and figure out like how it all kind of got discovered and everything?
I mean, yeah. I mean, in terms of coming up with the story, but by the time I was writing it, I had already determined the sequence of events that led to the Hail Mary. I didn't make it up as I was writing it.
Of course.
Yeah. So, so the flashback mechanism, hey, look, this guy lost his memory. Okay, so that's trope number 7 in the global trope database, sure, when organized by, in date of invention or something, right? But I did it that way because the stuff that happens before the launch of the Hail Mary is very sparse. It like happens, it's like, here's something interesting, and then months later, here's the next interesting thing, and then many months later, here's the next I mean, that takes place over like 5 years.
Yeah.
If I told the story linearly, there'd be it would be skimming through time for the first third of the book. And then all of a sudden, from that point on, you would never see any of the characters other than Grace again.
Right.
And only then would you be introduced to Rocky.
Yeah. And
so I just went with a flashback mechanism for just sheer naked exposition purposes.
But it works. I mean, that's the idea. Like, I like that it does kind of feel like a magic trick.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, the trick of it is that the thing that made me feel real good, the shower epiphany that kind of made this book happen, was when I was like, okay, the problem leads to the solution.
Right. Yeah.
It's like astrophage is the problem, but it's also the solution to the problem.
Mm-hmm. And I started to wonder, like, what would the world be like if we did have that technology?
Oh, well, I'm thinking sequels already. I mean,
there you go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
well, I'm not going to talk about it here.
But well, okay. So on that note, Xenonite.
I
would love to have some of that too.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So that was a narrative requirement for me, because I decided, all right, Rocky lives in an environment of 29 atmospheres of 210 degrees Celsius pure ammonia.
Right.
Okay. But I want him to interact with Grace, and I wanted to do it kind of seamlessly. But they're going to have something between them. Mm-hmm. So all of the real world technology that we have, you need like, oh sure, yeah, no problem. You want to hold 29 atmospheres. Yeah. So that'll be like maybe, 60 centimeters of steel
Yeah.
between the two of you, and you'll be talking only via like cameras or something like that. And that was unsatisfying. So I just said like, they're aliens. They have this awesome technology.
Mm.
And that was another fun thing. I decided like, I'm sick of the aliens always being the advanced ones. In this one, our protagonist, somewhat to his dismay, finds out we're the advanced aliens. Like the
They didn't have
Iridians,
radar or something like that?
they know. Well, they had radar, they had all that, but they didn't know about relativity,
Oh, right.
among other
Yeah. Yeah.
things.
Yeah. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
and they had never invented computers.
Uh-huh.
And so, I mean, they had a crew of 26 on their ship because it was like a sailing ship, kind of almost. And they had space travel. They invented different things at different rates.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I decided is like they're way behind us on things like computer technology, but they're way ahead of us on things like materials technology.
Yeah. I thought I did like that. I like that a lot. Because it did kind of throw a little bit of a twist in there from what you normally expect.
I tried to do a little bit of explanation on that. I figured just random events in um, random events in your society are kind of what cause one technology to advance more than another.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, wars cause us to like look into one technology really aggressively or something like that, right? So you can't just have a blanket statement to like, oh, at this point in its development, a civilization will have this.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like what was important at that moment in that area at that time to those people and so on. So, but I did try to explain why they never invented computers. And one thing is just, I didn't get too deep into how Iridian brains work, although they are solid state crystals. Um, they're really good at math. Like
Yeah.
they can just do like they're in their head, they can do math as well as you can with like a calculator. And so they never needed to invent adding machines.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
this was a problem they didn't need to solve.
Mm-hmm.
So they never kind of went down that. A fun side note, like just the random ass way technology works. So you go back to the ancient world, you go back to like, hey, kind of Roman Empire, maybe after Roman Empire, but like, a few hundreds AD or CE if you prefer. Um, uh, and you look at what's kind of going on technologically, and you'll see two things. In the East, in China, they have incredibly detailed ability to do porcelain work, like that fine china, as it's called, like just like far and away better than anything anyone in the West can do. Right? They just kick so much ass at porcelain that they can do whatever you want. They can make porcelain really, like literally they could make porcelain containers that have regions of them that are like a few microns thick. They're that good at it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And meanwhile, in the West, they were shit at that. But they did a bunch of interesting stuff with glass. And the reason is because in the East, okay, porcelain is what they use to contain things and stuff like that, and they got really good at it. In the West, they were into wine. The ancient Romans, they needed to make wine. And then later on, they'd make wine. They had to be able to see the wine as it was fermenting in the bottles. They needed to be able to look into the bottles. So they said, like, we can't just put these in ceramic bottles. Let's use glass. And the Asians knew about glass. They're like, yeah, you heat up sand, you get this clear material that who gives a shit. Porcelain's so much better, right?
Yeah.
But the Romans, or the later Roman, the descendants of the Romans, are like, I need to be able to see what's going on inside the wine bottle. So let's work out how to do all this stuff, but with glass. Okay, so now we have glass. And then people are like, hey, have you noticed that glass kind of does funny stuff to light? And that's when they invented glasses, like spectacles. And that caused Westerners to have their most intelligent people more functional in society for a decade or two longer than the East did. Because once you lose your ability to read and write, because your eyes get too crappy, if you're not wealthy enough to afford like, someone to do it for you, you just kind of stop being that useful to society. So just the fact that like randomly the West went toward glass while the East went toward porcelain ended up with bunch of huge scientific advancements for the West because it gave a a +5 to all the wise wise people in the West.
Yeah.
So
That's
that's
interesting. I never heard that before. That's super interesting. But that's a good point that even here amongst our different civilizations on Earth, technology progressed in different directions. And like if you're gonna have an alien species that's a completely different atmosphere and different physiology, and they evolved physically in a different way, of course their technology would evolve in a different way than ours did.
sure it's whatever's important to them. And one thing that pisses me off, I'm going to say
Here we
this on your
go.
show because your show has a lot of people who watch it. So I hope enough people see this that they stop sending these fucking emails. They say like, hey, Rocky's species didn't evolve sight. So how did they know their sun was getting dimmer? I'm like, they invented science. They understand what light is. They know how to make machines that can translate light into a sensory input they can have. And then like I sometimes end up with these email threads back and forth with people. It's like, yeah, but like, how would they even know there were stars out there because they couldn't see them? I'm like, it's like, and I just say like in the book, Earth scientists discovered the Petrova line like very quickly. The Petrova line's infrared light. Humans can't see infrared light. That doesn't bother you at all.
Yeah.
That they,
yeah. We've invented a lot of things to see things that we can't see.
Right. Yeah. And I'm like, we know all about electrons. Have you ever seen one? So that one always kind of
actually.
Yeah. So that one always kind of makes me mad. I'm like, how can you like this is a spacefaring civilization? Do you think they wouldn't have worked out the idea of, oh, hey, there's electromagnetic radiation and we can use that to gather information?
Mm-hmm. So I would assume that any sci-fi author would have the well actually people coming after them in a various different ways. I kind of wonder though if you get more than most because you are so detailed and scientifically accurate on a lot of the things that you do. Like you don't rely on space magic too much. It's very much rooted in science. So of course there's people picking it apart left and right.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't mind that at all because I bring that on myself by saying, hey, everybody, I made scientifically accurate stuff. And they're like, really?
Yeah, here we go.
Let's see what we can get. And I don't mind it at all. I actually kind of like it when somebody points out errors. And I'm like, oh, you got me there. That's a good one. Yeah, yep.
It does foster some interesting conversations. I mean, I get that a lot on my channel too. And a lot of times people point out things that, well, I get things wrong in my videos constantly, but as you've pointed out too.
I can't help it. I'm one of those people, but I have a direct line to you. I don't have to just say it in the comments. I can email you.
That's right.
I text your ass. That's awesome. Even as I was texting it, I'm like, I'm one of these assholes, but I'm still going to hit send.
Yeah. Yeah. And the specific one, the recent one was that Nebula video. I think I did.
It was just
it was simple math that I did wrong.
Well, yeah, it was just like you said, like, oh, 25% of something, so versus 100, whatever. It was like really, really irrelevant to the content of the video.
Exactly, and that's what I always get busted on is when I'm just like, for the point that I was making there. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent now, but the point that I was making there was simply that if you're going to lose 30% of your cells in this process, then you got to make more to do that, and it just makes it more difficult. Like, so the number didn't really matter that much, but
the point is you need
used
more.
A number,
and your number was wrong.
Yeah.
And so actually when people tell me about genuine errors, I'm like, cool, I like it. I love it. In fact, I love it that my readers are so engaged that they're like, I care enough to double check this, or wait a minute. But what bothers me is when people are like, Andy Weir was wrong about this because blah, and they're wrong. Like, that's what drives me crazy. Like, when I'm like, no, I'm not wrong, you're wrong, and you're
a jerk face.
And you're a jerk face, you big stupid baby. No, I'm not crying, you're crying. And no, like, and it bugs me. It's sometimes they email me and say like, hey, you got this thing wrong. And I'll email it back and say like, hey, no, I didn't. And that'll be a fun conversation. But what really drives me crazy is when it's just on a forum somewhere. Like, oh yeah, I like Project Hail Mary, except for you got this thing wrong, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I didn't get it wrong. That guy's wrong. But I can't respond.
Yeah.
I can't be that guy. I can't be like, yeah, yeah, I am the writer, and I came into this, whatever, the Iowa Cat Appreciation Forum, where somebody had a random thread about Project Hail Mary. Not that I Google myself obsessively or
No,
anything,
not
but
that you do
you're
that.
wrong, Millie from Piedmont,
That.
who has two Siamese and a Persian.
You're getting really specific here. I think maybe that's a real thing that happened.
No, but it's like that level of pettiness
Yeah,
where
yeah,
I'm like, me being that level of petty, where I'm like, meh.
yeah.
And like sometimes I've even thought about like, I could make a sock puppet account. I could go in and I could be like, hi, I'm somebody else who's not Andy Weir. My name
But
is
Andy Weir's really cool
my
though.
my name is name is Randy Shear, and I think you got a mistake in your analysis there.
Oh, I've been tempted to do that too.
Oh man, it's so tempting.
Yeah.
But you would just look so damn unprofessional.
Mm-hmm. You have to be above it.
Yeah, you have to pretend like I don't know why authors pretend like they don't read this shit. We all do.
Yeah.
All creators.
Yeah.
We all read all the shit. I Google Project Hail Mary, sort by, this week, every week, just to see what people are saying.
Sure. You know what? I have a Google alert where like once a week I get an email with all the times that the name Joe Scott was referenced somewhere. I don't remember why I originally did it. I just set it up and now I get it and I just look at it. It's never once ever mentioned me.
It's always some other guy named Joe Scott.
There's a basketball coach out there that makes a lot of headlines, apparently. There's a lot of obituaries that come through. That's not creepy. That doesn't give me existential dread or anything.
I don't even bother searching for Andy Weir. I always search for like the title, because there's nothing out there, in quotes, nothing out there, Project Hail Mary. It's only that, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, when I would search for Andy Weir, there's a Scottish soccer player, and there's also like the manager of some like he's a bigwig at some major bank, and so he makes financial news like frequently. And then there's a guy who's like a bourbon connoisseur, like he writes articles about, he's basically like a taster. Okay. And he writes articles about, this is bourbon. I was like, someday, if I was you, Joe, if I was a YouTuber instead of just some, weaselly little writer, I'd be like, I'm going to make a video where I get all the Andy Weirs together. I'm just going to get us all.
I was about to say it'd be really sad if like there was some other Andy Weir or some other Joe Scott that's just like living a much better life.
Yeah.
And you're like, I want to be that Joe Scott. How did I become this Joe Scott?
I'm sure that banker dude seems to have it pretty good, right? I mean, he's some rich guy. He runs a freaking bank. He's doing all right.
I don't know.
And the guy whose whole job is to drink bourbon.
I was about to say that's one I would prefer to be.
That Andy Weir is doing good.
Yeah, it's probably got cirrhosis, but it's okay.
It's all right.
Worth it.
There was another guy who's an Andy Weir, and the only reason I saw it is because people pointed me to his Facebook page. It says like, Andy Weir. It's like, no, I'm not that one.
Oh, please stop sending me emails. Speaking of creators, did I see in the acknowledgments that Cody Don Reader helped you out?
Yeah, Cody's Lab. Yeah, I love his channel. And
what did he help you out with?
Chemistry.
Okay.
Yeah, I needed to know how you get. What was it? I needed. What did I need? I needed a way to. Oh yeah, I needed to get nitrogen from ammonia. So I'm like, I have ammonia. I want to make nitrogen, but I'm limited by stuff that I have aboard a spaceship. And Cody immediately he emailed back and said, "Do you have copper?" I'm like, "Sure." There's probably tubing or something in there. Yeah. It's copper. He's like, "Okay, here's the reaction. You do this with ammonia and copper, and the output will be a bunch of crap and liberated N2." Yeah. I'm like, thanks, Cody.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So Cody follows my channel. We've interacted before. I've never actually met him though. He seems like a cool
I've never
guy.
met him, but yeah, I've never met him, and I've never had a real-time conversation with him. It's always been emails or.
Oh, okay. So you just looked up his email from the website or from the YouTube channel and just hit him up. Tell the audience of this podcast exactly how to get in contact with Cody Don Reader. I'm sure he'll appreciate it.
I think, well, he did, okay, yeah, he did a thing on The Martian. Like he was, I forget what his first Martian related thing was. It might have been like, can a potato survive in a vacuum and still germinate? Or it was something like that. I don't exactly remember, but he did some experiment that was based on The Martian, and he talked about it in The Martian by Andy Weir. And then so I sent him an email saying like, hey, this is Andy Weir. Sure. I enjoyed that thing. Just like let you know, and that got us talking. I just sent it to his public, whatever here's the account that you send fan mail to. You know, now he's off, camping out in Utah. Or is that where that land is? Chicken Hole Base? I don't know if you follow the Chicken Hole Base stuff.
I have not followed that, honestly.
Oh, okay, yeah. So lately, what he's been up to is like making a his own simulated Mars habitat. Like he bought some land out in the middle of nowhere, I think in Utah, and he's just always setting up things like making a greenhouse, see if he can make that work, and and so on, and keeping everything
cool
sealed.
Guy. He much smarter than me. So like don't ever ask me how to do any kind of chemical conversion. You can throw jokes off of me maybe, but that's about it.
And I'd like to thank Joe Scott because I needed to know how to turn a chair 180 degrees. I just wasn't sure how to do that. I mean, if you do it to the beat of some drums, I guess that makes it work a little bit.
That's my one true talent, is turning around in my chair.
Oh man, I had such plans too for that first time you came to my place. So I have a shelf almost exactly like the one you have. Well, like it's an IKEA. Yeah. Mine's black, but whatever. And so what I was going to do was put a little temporary desk in front of it and put tchotchkes up. So it looks like similar to your shelf with like stuff up there. I even have a vintage typewriter. My wife does. I'd put that up there. I'd make it look like yours. And then I wanted it like when you come by to visit, I'd have like my wife would quote unquote answer the door. Oh, Andy, he's in his office. And then, like, up against those shelves, I'd be like, oh, hey, Joe, what's up? And then you'd be all like a little creeped out. And I'm like, come on, let's talk about it.
Out the front door.
No, I had in mind, you'd be like, oh, okay, that's a little weird. And then we'd walk by. And as you see, like just as we're walking down the hall, just completely in the background, there's like pictures of you. and like pictures of you, some of them of you just like taking out your trash.
So, you were gonna hire a private investigator to take secret shots of me.
No, I wasn't to prank you. I was gonna have you cooperate with me on it. And then we passed by like a little wooden altar thing set up that has like a toothbrush and stuff like that. It's clearly like, and I'm like, no, Joe, come further into the house. I want to show you the soundproof room I have back here.
Step down these stairs.
Yeah, just go down these stairs. It is
Good
strange.
Lord, I'm glad you didn't do that.
It would have been fun, but I mean, it was would have maybe taken away a little bit from what you were going for.
The whole turning around in the chair thing, I think so little about it that whenever somebody references it, it kind of goes past me.
Yeah.
Because it's just a thing that I do at the beginning. I don't remember why I first started doing it, and I could probably stop doing it, but everybody would flip out if I did.
No, you cannot.
I know.
Oh no, that's out of the question.
But I think that's like, I don't know, that's like the hello. That's me saying hello to everybody whenever I start a video. And so I guess when people meet me in person, they want something similar to that or something. I don't know. And I just don't think about it at all. It's just a funny thing. Well, so I was going to bring up so way back when, like I said, I read, I read your book 4 months ago, whenever it was. And I know that there was a deal for a film. I'm assuming that's going forward probably very slowly because they all do.
Yeah, they all do. Things are going well, I think.
Okay. Well, so this is what the question I was going to ask you was, when do you think, because you do books and stories.
When do you think that?
Sometimes I gotta time my brain.
You're clapping back at me. What did I do?
That's a literal clap back. Now I don't know what to do with my hands now. Okay. you write books that take place in space, and movies get made of this where it's taking place in space. What I was wondering was, at what point is space travel going to become cheap enough to where we'll literally just launch movie sets into space and shoot movies in space? But well, right now,
strictly
as
speaking,
we're talking,
last week, yeah.
Yes, there is a Russian film crew on the ISS right now.
Yes, that's pretty cool.
How crazy is that?
It's crazy. It's like 7.3 crazy.
Yeah.
It's like, it's crazy. I think it's awesome. I mean, it's kind of a stunt, right? But there's also Tom Cruise talking about doing a SpaceX flight for a movie. Mm-hmm. And I mean, he did, like, in The Mummy, in the scene of The Mummy where they're in the crashing plane and they have to put on, like, what do you call it, parachutes and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. That was all filmed on a Vomit Comet.
Yeah.
Like, he was in Zero G. Tom Cruise loves to do these crazy ass stunts.
Oh, yeah.
So power to him. He's like, you want to send me in space? Sure.
Yeah. He's going to be 80 years old, still, like, hanging off the bottom of a helicopter and stuff.
Well, whatever. I mean, like, William Shatner's 90 years old. He's going into space soon.
Tomorrow. Actually, like, just before we got on here, there was some, like, pre-flight stuff that was coming up in my YouTube feed. So yeah, that's tomorrow morning. Shatner's going to. Of course, by the time people hear this, it will have been.
Talk about filming stuff in space. Yeah. In terms of the film, I think they're planning on doing everything nice and traditional. We have just what the current status as of when we're recording this is, we have Ryan Gosling attached to play the lead.
Right.
Phil Lord and Chris Miller are going to direct it, and we have Drew Goddard working on the screenplay adaptation. He did the screenplay adaptation of The Martian, so he did a great job there, and so we're thrilled to have him working on that. And we have all kinds of design concepts and stuff whipping around for what Rocky's going to look like.
Oh, that's got to be so fun, though.
It is, and it isn't. It's also stressful.
Okay, let's hear it. Let's hear the stress part.
Well, no, the stressful part is, like, we have to get this right. Like, the people who read the book, they don't give a shit about anything else. They're going to go to the theater to see Rocky.
Like you said, like, everybody's going gaga over.
Yeah,
over
they just absolutely love Rocky. We have to get Rocky perfectly right, and obviously he's like CGI mostly. Mm-hmm. I mean, or he's a creature creation, right? So there's going to be CGI, and they're also thinking there's going to be, like, practical puppetry or animatronics to make for better, integration into the scene and stuff like that. And they really want to make it, they really don't want it to look like, oh, and here's a CGI thing. They want it to be good. One thing, it's also Lord and Miller are working on Artemis.
I was going to ask. I thought that they were. Yeah.
And one thing that's really important to them, which I think is really neat, is they're not going to quietly approximate lunar gravity to be 1G. Yeah. They want the whole movie to be 1.6G. So everything you see, they're going to work to make it look like 1.6G going on, including people's hair, like.
That's challenging.
They're not screwing around. Yeah, no, they have ideas for how to do, this, that, and the other thing. We got wire work for the people in the front. Background, we can get away with a little bit of slow motion, like the moon landing deniers thing, and so on. But
interesting that the same guys are working on both of your films. Was that just a coincidence? Or?
The main point of contact for me that I always see is Aditya Sood. He's a producer. He was a producer on The Martian, and then he left Simon Kinberg Productions to go work for Lord and Miller. So now I find myself working with Lord and Miller a lot. So really, it's all about Aditya.
Sure, yeah.
You work with the people you know. I know him. I trust him. He's a good guy. I like him personally. I have pissed him off on occasion, and he still likes me. So there's some, resilience to it.
That's how you know it works. If you can have a blowout fight and still work together,
and still be and make up and still be buddies and afterward and stuff. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, I should probably start trying to bring this to a close. I wanted to keep it about an hour, but how's
with all the stuff we're gonna have to cut out? You've only got 8 minutes right now. Sorry, what were you saying?
How's daddy life going?
Daddy life is a lot of work. It is a lot of work. When you're almost 50 years old and you have a baby, it's a lot harder than say being 25 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, my little guy was born in this summer, and his name is Flynn. He's my little swashbuckler, and everything's going great. He's a baby, and the creature just keeps getting bigger, and so, and it's an enormous amount of work. He's not even 6 months old yet, and so it's just nonstop work. In fact, I can hear him crying slightly in the background right now. My wife is wrangling him.
Well, that was another reason why I read about the time I read the book, and I was going to try to set this up like right then is when he was born. I was like, yeah, you're going to need some time on your own for
I did need some time. And actually, I've been turning down everything, like all interviews, all events. So this is like literally, with like one exception, doing this with you is like the first.
Oh.
Yeah. So this is actually doing this talk with you is only the second like thing that I've done since the baby was born, just because I like you.
But the baby was born like right after the book came out.
Yeah.
So you really haven't had a chance to do much promotion for it at all.
Well, the book came out in May 4th, and the baby came out about a month later. So I got all of the publicity stuff done, and then once the baby was born, I canceled everything else or whatever. But there was one paid event. It was virtual, but still a paid event. So that one I did.
Sure.
But other than that, you're the first voluntary, because we like Joe.
Because we're buds.
In this house, we like Joe.
Andy, you're my Rocky.
Oh.
Or am I your Rocky? Which way would it go? I don't know.
Fist my bump.
Everybody likes you, so you're Rocky. I like to watch you crap.
Yeah, it's weird.
That's how you know we're
I'm
buds.
just going to be honest. It's weird. But I'm the one who set up the webcam in the bathroom for you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you did send the instructions and you helped me focus in. I guess I could just unplug that if I had a problem with
it. Please don't.
Yeah, no, I understand. I
need my daily constitutional.
Your daily constitutional.
Or your daily constitutional.
My daily constitutional.
Well, I'll let you get back
what's
to
funny
you,
is my life revolves around poo now. Because of the baby. It's like, did he poo today? Did he poo? How long has it been since he poo? Oh my, it's been 41 hours and 13 minutes since the last poo. Maybe it's time for prune juice, or should we escalate straight to gripe water? It's all about the poo.
I've not had the child, but puppy, sort of similar in the sense that you can't take your eyes off of her for a while
because she'll eat something fatal or crap on things.
Yeah.
She's not really a puppy, right? How old is she?
She was born right around Christmas, actually. So less than a year.
Wow, she's a 10-month. She's a dog.
She's becoming a dog. She hasn't had any real accidents lately, knock on wood.
Yeah, she's a dog, and I could tell just from the 10 seconds I saw her that she's a good girl. She's a good girl. She's a very good girl.
She's our cuddler, which I like.
Oh yeah. Well, I've got a human cuddler. Oh man, it's great. He just smiles at me whenever he sees me. He just smiles. Like I'll walk into the room. He's like, "Oh,
I know you,
that guy.
You're my favorite guy.
You're my favorite guy." But he doesn't have object permanence yet. So when I hold him and he's facing away, he's like, then I'm like, still me up here. He's like, oh, hey.
So he's very literally out of sight, out of mind.
Literally. Yeah. He doesn't understand it. Babies at this age don't yet understand that like things exist outside their field of view.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's gotta be a great feeling.
Yeah. That is a weird. Joe, what?
No, but seriously though, like, I mean, holding this baby, your heart swelling and everything.
Oh, it is awesome. It is great. And I've never been conflicted on this. I've wanted a baby since I was in my 20s. I've always wanted to be a dad. Yeah. Took me a while to find Ms. Right and kind of get that going. But Ms. Right is already right now asking if we're about done.
Well, I should let you get back to Miss Right so you can.
So I can spell her on the baby. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, Andy, thanks, man. Thanks for doing this, and
lots of fun as always, man.
We can have a drink again sometime.
Yeah, someday after the apocalypse, either I'll be in Texas or you'll be in California, and we can hang out.
Apparently, there's a lot of swapping between these two states these days, but.
Yeah. Maybe I'll just move out there. Why'd you move out there to California? Be close to Joe.
Yeah.
No, but really. No, really.
No, really.
Okay. I can be almost as close to Joe as I want. I actually do this thing. I have to be 500 feet from Joe or any of his property. But
after the dungeon incident.
Yeah, after that. But I can be, I bought a house that's like 508 feet from Joe's property. And so we're good.
This is always fun.
And I have a 7-foot telescope. Anyway.
You in podcasts as well as I do.
Yay!
Sounds like.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks, man. Andy.
Always a pleasure.
So that was a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it too. Big thanks to Andy for taking the time again to talk with me. Andy's a great guy, and being able to call him a friend is easily the coolest thing that's come out of my time being a YouTuber. So show him some love. Check out his books if you haven't, and hopefully we'll get some more movies out of his books to. So like I said at the beginning, this is the first episode in this series. We're going to be trying to release new conversations at a cadence of around 2 a month starting out. And these are going to just be audio only for now. We'll be releasing, video clips to various places. But this is going to be an audio podcast. So if you want to catch future episodes, be sure to subscribe via whatever podcasting service you prefer. So the next one should be coming out in a couple of weeks or so. And it's a big one. I don't want to spoil it, but it was somebody I was really excited to talk to. Kind of a big deal for the channel. So keep an eye out for that. But in the meantime, thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting this crazy thing I do. And I don't know, insert inspiring statement here. What can I say? This is a work in progress. See you next time.